How many times have I told you? Not in the castle!
Sorry, Father.
Sorry, Father.
First, a two-parter, because your credits, the things you've done, are really very contemporary with Hull High. What possessed you? Where did the thought come from? Do you remember the process that got you to there?
The process was I was desperate to keep my income coming in, and my kids in private school. So when I made my new deal with Reeves Television, they're owned by an English company, Tim's International, and it was actually their idea to find some sort of a castle show. Robin Hood had been very big that summer, had done $200 million, and because they were owned by a British company, they felt that they could afford a period piece, and we could actually shoot it in England. But I didn't want to do Robin Hood every week, and so I was stumped. And so I went into other projects, and I came back to it only one day when I was going through the TV guide, and I just kept seeing one Frontier family show after another, and the repeats. I saw High Chaparral, and I saw Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, The Big Valley, you name it. And it dawned on me that, in essence, this could be a Frontier family show if you just move the Frontier back about 500 years and change the, from guns to swords and chaps to armor, and take those same dynamics that worked in all of those shows, which were in essence morality tales. And so I created our own set of characters, of course, a patriarch with 4 children with a lot of the same troubles that every family goes through in the 1300s or the 1900s. And so that was kind of the genesis of it.
Now, the common wisdom has it that network program people aren't the slightest interested in anything that hasn't been done. And this, by being medieval and such, did you find resistance when you walked in, first sat down in somebody's office? What kind of response did you get?
I think it is a weird thing to swallow when you first hear it. I mean, it's a little ludicrous. In fact, Gary Levine, who's a development executive at ABC, loved the idea, and it makes sense once you hear the pitch. Once
and
you
he did right from the beginning?
He bought into it, right? Once you delineate the characters and you can see it, but if you one-line it, if you say Bonanza in the Middle Ages, or a little castle on the prairie, it sounds pretty stupid and far-fetched. But if you really look at it, it's not. I mean, it is a family show. And it's romantic, and it has adventure, it has action, drama. I mean, everything that appeals to audiences and to kids. So, and I think that we were lucky enough to execute the script and then execute the pilot in a fashion that, I mean, you're right, it could have gone south very quickly. It could have, it's one of those projects that, like Hull High, I mean, a high school musical, I mean, a musical period. Anything like this can just be a disaster and it's all in the execution. So we got a little lucky, and we did a pretty good job at the same time. Yeah.
Well, were there any major changes in terms of characters or approach between the concept that you began with and what's now on the air? Did you also have in mind the 3 children and the villain?
Yeah, it was all designed that way from the very beginning. The only change we made was a cast change, I think right? We found in casting that 2 of the brothers look exactly alike. And God knows why I couldn't see that when I cast them, but they were both thin, rail thin, and similar facially, and somehow when you put all the clothes on, which tends to look the same, you couldn't tell them apart. So we ended up bringing back another son and sending one off to a novel way of getting rid of an actor and bringing a new one in. I felt terrible for the actor Ben Porter, but.
I'm glad to get that on the record so that it's not the actor's fault. Obviously,
he was fine. He was terrific.
Wrong place.
It was just simply a matter of picking which of the 2 boys I thought had the character that I could service better in the series, and so that's why I went with the Richard character. And then we brought in, you saw Armis, this big lug of a guy, and now you really see the difference in the 3 boys.
Now, within the characters, the one bone of contention that's showing up a little in the press is that those challenging the tough-minded, independent women. Did you have any trouble with the network or with Reeves about
No, they loved
part
it.
of the concept?
They loved it. They loved it. I mean, the fact that it's a feminist in the Middle Ages, you know, it's ripe for headlines. I mean, it's totally unrealistic, probably. Although, I mean, there were women in history, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and I mean, Joan of Arc, of course. I mean, there were strong-minded women. I don't think that they existed within the storylines that we do every week in a castle with her. I mean, in real life, probably Eleanor would have married Henry of Galt, and there wouldn't have been anything said of it. No more discussion. But it's television, right? And we're not doing a history.
Well, what I've found, I'm sure you were given the same report from the research people from screenings, and said, women who have seen it, the young women really like that. The old women I find are crazy about Nigel Terry and James Faulkner.
Right. Well, I mean, it's pretty depressing to tune into a television show every week where the women were battered and bruised and subservient, and that's pretty much how they were back then. So yeah, it's a leap, but it's a fun leap.
Yeah. Well, I like that, and within that same area, I know that you've decided not to nail yourself to. This is exactly 1432 on a Wednesday afternoon. Did anybody fight you on that?
Yeah, I had interesting enough, probably the biggest thorn in my side was this whole time period thing. When I started to research the project, I wanted to find a time in history that I could would give me most flexibility for stories and for color, and I did a lot of reading, and then we hired a UCLA researcher, head of the medieval department at UCLA, Scott Waugh, and came to the conclusion that the 1350s would be perfect. Edward III was on the throne. Commerce was starting to happen again in the villages, so there was a marketplace. It wasn't quite the dark ages of, say, the Robin Hood time, and Excalibur time. So I liked that. But then what happened was I wrote the script, Edward, and we started to mount the show, and especially here in England, where the history is rich and very important to them, and they take this stuff very seriously. And you would find that the production designer, who's responsible for designing the set, I mean, I would look at it, we'd go pick out chairs, and I go, that's a great looking chair, it would really be nice. Nope, can't do it. Why not? That's 5 years too late. I said, no one's going to care. So, I mean, I had to fight that at every turn, and then it dawned on me that it doesn't matter. I mean, we're not a history. So let's just call it somewhere in England a long, long time ago and let it go at that, right? So I dropped Edward III. It's just Edward. It's King Edward. It could be Edward 1 through 4. So we still went up against that to a degree.
Yeah, because production people would be so accustomed to getting yelled at if they
exactly.
Okay, just a couple more simple things. Just wondered, had you ever seen any of these actors? Did you know any of their work before?
Well, of course, I knew Ione Skye, the American actress, from Say Anything and the Rachel Papers. And Glenn Quinn I had also seen on Roseanne. But, yes, Nigel Terry I'd known from Excalibur and loved him in Lion in Winter, which is one of my favorite films. But the other ones, no, I really didn't know. I mean, that's the wonderful thing about casting here, is that they're all fresh faces. I mean, so many of them are fresh faces to me, and consequently fresh faces to the American audience. So you just have, I mean, they come in to read for you, and you look at their credits, and they're like a book, and I know none of them, have not seen them in anything, but they read, and it's like a kid in a candy store trying to pick which one you're going to choose. And also the experience I found is they're so much more theater-oriented. I mean, all their credits are theater, whereas in Los Angeles you'd find so many film or TV credits. And that it's kind of different. And I found casting to be one of the more exciting parts of doing the show here.
And do you find, as now without the producer hat, without the production experience, as a writer, is there any difference in working here, or when the door closes, is it all the same?
Oh, it's all the same, really, to a large degree. I mean, it's still finding an interesting story, that has a beginning, middle, and end, some twists, good character things. There's a lot of what ifs, you know? What if Sir Thomas, you know, found out that? I mean, there's a lot of that. It's still a lot the same, you know? It's the same.
And has your view or the direction it's going, has it been affected yet by, so what you've seen the first, I guess is it 3 episodes you've shot now?
Only from the standpoint that, yeah, I mean, you do.
Just proving that you were right.
Yeah, that as you go in a series, as you get along, you find the characters, you find the actors, what they do best. You know, you just start to narrow in on each one. You also find out what works production-wise and what doesn't work production-wise. If you bit off more than you can chew, you know, I think we're finding you can't do a huge battle sequence every week. You just can't do it. But what you can do is you can do one every 4 weeks, you know, and then you can do little snippets here and there, you know, the other 3 weeks. But it's finding that balance too, so that you can justify doing a series over the long haul, you know, in England, the scope. Because after all, television is still character-driven. I mean, hopefully people are going to tune in after the 6th week to see what Sir Thomas and Eleanor are going to do, rather than what sword fight they're going to be involved in.
Must have more money quickly. Take the whole village.
There could be resistance.
Thanks to Sir Thomas's generous dowry, I'll have the Barbican. And with it, the only passageway into Tristan. Conquering a land so rich and so weak will not be difficult. If we have the money to raise an army before winter!
Right, when people ask you what it is that you're doing, what is the show about?
I mean, in a sentence, I've always described the show as Bonanza meets the Sheriff of Nottingham, which in essence is what it is. You have, at the center of the story is Sir Thomas Grey and his family, and the 4 young children, and the usual conflicts that you would find in a family. And round the corner in the black castle of Mullins is the other side of the coin, is the beast in the backyard. And the show is about them discovering as they mature, them discovering their new talents and discovering life and cutting their teeth in the big bad world outside. I mean, it's an everyday story of frontier folk who just happen to be in 14th century England.
And in this situation you play?
I play a character called John Mullins. To give him his full title, he's Baron Sir John de Mullins, who in fact was a real person who did exist at this time, was a known marauder, one of your archetypal wicked baron. He was actually Baron of Stoke Poges. He sacked Nottingham Castle, but was forgiven for it, which is why, this is how I explain this medallion. This is the medallion that Kevin Costner wore in Prince of Thieves. And the logic behind this for me is that it became part of Nottingham Castle treasure and then was nicked by Mullins. And he wears it to remember, you know, how he started his life. In fact, the real character of Mullins was very close to the king and became treasurer of England, which is where his great wealth is derived from. I mean, he's obviously a man who's desperately greedy, and unlike the wicked barons of today, who we would see as the head of the multinational corporations, not all of them, some of them are very kindly people, but there are some, and we know who they are, particularly wicked ones. The great thing about Mullins is that he doesn't have to apologize to everybody. He doesn't have to hide his intentions, you know, because life was very simple and very straightforward in that time. You know, you can come on and do exactly what you want to do, you know, and you could defend yourself with your private army if no one likes you. That's the beauty of playing something like that. It's very direct.
You as an actor, I understand you do this about as often as you can get.
Yeah.
Are you from Born Identity? not a pleasant fellow.
No.
Devices and Desires, not really lovable.
No, he wasn't
Did
lovable.
you do a lot of bad people? Do people see you as a bad person?
I don't
What's
know.
going on?
I seem to be stuck with this. You know, when I went up to meet the executive producer of the show and the director of the pilot in the first place, in fact, I read for Thomas Gray, for the hero. You know, I read a couple of times, and there was a lot of hurried whispering. They said, "Listen, could you read from Mullins?" And I said, "Who's he?" And they said, "Well, just read it." I said, "Oh my God, it's not the villain, is it? Not again." I was desperately. My kids are desperate for me to play somebody nice for a change. I mean, the last time I played somebody nice was about 6 years ago. I did a series which was shown in the States called First Among Equals, which was based on Jeffrey Archer's book about politics. And I got to be leader of the Conservative Party and, in fact, Prime Minister as a professional Conservative, rather like John Major. And we finished with the 1992 election, and it, in fact, foretold a Conservative victory in the States by a professional Tory as opposed to a patrician Tory. And that was genuinely the last time I played somebody who, you know, you might want to have to dinner. Now I've gone back to the real heavyweight shits, you know.
This is not a classical, physical freedom here. This kind of
Yes. It's, you know, listen, Jim, you put on a lot of black leather and studs, you know. it takes the way you move and the way you play the role, you know. There's no way that you can come on and be polite and subtle. If you're got up like this, you know, you come through the door, people know what you're about. But it's fun. It's huge fun to be that free, you know. And I mean, you say I play a lot of villains. That's true, but generally I tend to play, you know, villains in suits, chairman of the board, you know, the dodgy property developer, all those sort of things. I don't play overt criminals or overtly physical people as a rule. There's something usually very contained about what I'm asked to do. But it's great to play John Mullins, where he's completely physical, you know, and you know you feel he could rip your head off or rip your knickers off, depending what sex you are, the moment he comes in the room.
I've heard it said that you and Nigel Terry were at school together.
Yes, that's right. Well, in fact, curiously, Nigel trained at the Central School of Speech and Drama, and the year he left, I went to the Central School of Speech and Drama. The year I left, Sherry Lungi went to the Central School of Speech and Drama, and a few years after that, Jonathan Firth went to the Central School. So I'm happy to say that it's provided a good line, you know, from Olivier onwards, of working actors.
And then you didn't know each other at that time.
No, well, we did, in fact, because Nigel lived right by the school, you know, and
You were often up to the same pub?
yeah, we used to drink in the same pub, you know, from 1967 on, I think. You know, we managed. I shouldn't say that, really. That gives away my age.
Had you worked together since, or is this the first time?
We worked together last year for the first time. We were thrown together for a production of an Italian film of Genghis Khan, or Genghis Khan, as they prefer it, and which we shot in Kyrgyzstan, which is in what was the Soviet Union, just above the Afghan and Pakistan and Chinese border. It's right down there. And my son, who's in the second episode of this show, was the young Genghis Khan. I played his father, Yasuke, with a shaved head and a ponytail, you know, the full Mongol number. And my son Guy, as I say, played was the young Genghis. And Nigel was the shaman, which is the sort of the witch doctor. And we were out there for 5 or 6 weeks, got stuck there during the coup, 2,000 feet up a mountain. Finally got out when it quietened down again, you know. It's an interesting time to be in the Soviet Union.
That's an interesting point. You've worked now them twice quickly with your son. What did you do in this show? Okay.
My son Guy in the series is the sort of one of the guest leads in the second episode. He plays a character called Lord Uther, who is he's pre-adolescent, but because in those days people tended to get married at 12 and 13, you know, he's as the son of a duke, decides to flex his burgeoning power, shall we say, and go after Ione Skye. And there's some wonderful, very funny love scenes where he's trying to seduce Ione Skye. He's 13 and she's, 20 or whatever, But it's not prurient at all. It's great fun. It's very well written, actually, that stuff.
Were this kind of, the movies like this, that Burt Lancaster and Errol Flynn, was popular when you were a kid? Did you like this kind of movie?
Oh, yeah. I miss this kind of movie. I think audiences miss this kind of show as well.
Because they just disappeared. They're enormously popular now.
Yeah, this show really wouldn't have been possible, I don't think, had it not been for the enormous commercial success of Prince of Thieves, which was the biggest grossing picture of last year. Because people enjoy a good story and an adventure, and with a certain amount of humor. And I think the show will do very well because it's such a relief not to have yet another cop show, yet another drawing room comedy. I mean, as Variety put it, with the staircase in the middle of the set or whatever. I mean, this, we get out and about. It looks great, and it's straightforward adventure, but it's funny as well. And it's not divorced from present day, whereas many people might be put off by the fact that it has a historical background, but because the dialogue is modern and the issues are modern, such as they are, I think it has a real relevance. So but at the same time, it's a different world. It's a wonderful, strange, magical world, which is fun to join for an hour a week.
It's certainly everything we've seen on television. Has English television ever done a series on that? I mean, we see Blackadder, but that's been heavily.
Well, Blackadder is a satirical comedy and hugely enjoyable and very, very well done. But I mean, I think part of the reason of them was to see modern characters back in those times, and it gives a certain flavour and a certain richness. I mean, the Blackadder series was set in 4 different periods, and each one has its own language differences, and was enormously successful and is a classic series and will continue to be shown and reshown for years to come, as I hope this one will be.
Yeah, but you haven't had a series like this, have you?
No, I can't think of a period action adventure. There was one a few years ago which was set in the Civil War, which is much harder for an international audience, I think, the specifics of the Civil War, because it's much more to do with politics, and this show isn't at all to do with politics, much more straightforward. But, I mean, the last show I can genuinely think of that was successful, which I think actually was also basically an American show, was the original Robin Hood for television in black and white, with Richard Greene and Alan Wheatley as the sheriff, and which I loved as a kid, watched every episode. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, great stuff.
Damn you, woman, I won't hear any more of this.
Rant and wail until these old walls shake. It won't change the truth. You're sending your daughter into bondage.
I gave my word.
And how I hope that word comforts you when you see the hatred in eyes that once worshipped you.
Eleanor will marry Henry of Galt. She will marry him.
I won't be here when you come back, Thomas. Too much of my life has already been wasted on foolish men. In the series of Covington Cross, I play Lady Elizabeth. And Lady Elizabeth is a woman who has been married 3 times. She is the friend of Sir Thomas, who is the patriarch, the father of the children in the piece.
And what is the show about, from your point of view?
Well, I suppose in a nutshell, it's about a family. It's a family drama. It's about the relationships within the family. It's about the children growing up. It's about life in medieval times. Each episode will deal with a different adventure, a different incident, some sort of conflict or some adventure. It's basically about a family.
And clear one thing else up for us. We can handle Lady Elizabeth easily enough, but how do you pronounce your name?
Right, well, my name is, it's a mixture of French and Italian. My father was Italian, so it's Sherry, or Chérie, but I don't insist on a French pronunciation. It's Sherry Lunghi.
Lunghi. Okay, now we'll all know. Thank you.
Now you have it straight.
Now,
There's no excuse for you making a mistake.
when we first began screening Covington Cross, one of the major reactions was to the independence, the nature, and the style of the two women involved, Lady Elizabeth and the neighbor Sir Thomas's daughter. There were a few complained that it was anachronistic. Women wouldn't have behaved that way at the time. How do you feel about this?
Well, there's very little recorded, of course, because history has been recorded by men, because education was a privilege that men have enjoyed for so long. We don't really know. You know, we assume that because they've been given a passive backseat role in the way in which history has been interpreted, that that's the way that they were. But I think women have always been strong. I don't think the world would be populated if women had not been strong and tenacious and able to pick up the pieces after the wars and the famines and the devastations and the rape and pillage that's taken place over the centuries. I think the women have picked it all up and started again. I think that's not to say women don't need men. I believe that the ultimate ideal is partnership, is for the best of both to be amalgamated and make up a partnership. I don't believe in a war of the sexes. But I think of the frontier women of America, for example. I often think of those women when I fly across America and I look down on that land, those massive areas, uninhabited, those massive areas of desert and those mountains, and I think of those women who didn't have the benefits of contraception in those days, who were having children, feeding children, no fresh water, impossible climate, and under impossible conditions, and dragging families across huge expanses of unexplored territory. I think that's, so I think women have always had a resourcefulness and a strength of their own. So I think for these women, for it to be a surprise to people that these women have character and guts, I can't understand that, actually. I think women have always had those qualities.
I noticed in an episode that's coming up, while that love and respect is clearly established there between Lady Elizabeth and Sir Thomas, there's a business clash between the two of them, and she doesn't just roll over and play dead, does she?
Well, no, the interesting thing is you have a woman who is independent in this time, in medieval time, because she's obviously, well, I suppose she's gained wealth and a certain material comfort through her 3 marriages, and she's got her castle to run, she has her livelihood to maintain, she has her bills to pay, and she runs her life. You know, she's obviously learnt how to run her life. And when she comes across a man for whom this is strange or inconceivable or difficult to accept, she doesn't compromise. This is the way she is, and she says, she doesn't actually say, but what she is more or less saying throughout the episode is, this is the way I am, this is my life, and you have to learn to accept this. It's you who must change, which is an interesting conflict.
Now, you just remind me, and talk about this now, within the relationships. Another thing that I found talking to people after screenings, the women that I've spoken to are very much taken by both Sir Thomas and by James Faulkner as Mullen. And they find manliness about those two characters, which I find women in the audience like a lot.
Yes, well, I think that's the other thing. I think what is nice, you have the very, very clear distinction between the male and the female. The women are very feminine. I mean, the very nature of the way women dressed as well. And the men are very male. But in a complementary sense, I don't think it's not as if the women, in order to assert themselves, have to imitate the men and sacrifice their femininity.
Okay, now, within the working situation, you know, we're sitting here in the middle of an armory in the castle, and there are set weeks and they're long, and you're in a series world now. Had you done a series before?
Yes, I have done a series before. Yes, I think there was in the early part of my career, I avoided series because I think there was so much I wanted to learn and so much I wanted to try and so much I wanted to discover. Also, I started very early on in theatre, So a series to me felt like being closeted away. It felt like too much of a commitment that I'd be missing out on other things. But more recently, I've done a series in England, 12 episodes, 2 lots of 6, about a woman who is the manageress of you call it a soccer team, an English soccer team, called the manageress. And other times, earlier on, I've played cameo roles in series. I've done guest appearances or cameo roles. But that was my first experience of actually playing throughout a series and also playing the leading role, having that responsibility.
Are you liking this kind
Yes,
of work?
I am. I'm liking it very much. Something I really enjoy about doing a series is the teamwork. I like being part of a team. I like the rapport and the relationships that you build out with fellow actors and actresses. And then once you're on board, you're carrying this thing through right to the very end. You're creating this volume of work, and I like that challenge. And it's difficult. It's a discipline as well. You have to get your work and rest together and cut out the play. You have to really get into a tunnel mentality and keep up your regime of rest and preparation. And that's a nice discipline too. I enjoy that.
Well, you've got a sort of reunion here with Nigel.
With Nigel, yes.
From Excalibur.
Yes, it is. It's sort of it's Arthur and Guinevere, 12 or 13 years on, yes.
Had you encountered him in other areas over the time?
No, we bump into each other in social situations, or I've gone to see him in a play, gone back and said hello afterwards. But no, we haven't worked together since, between then and now.
What is it to come back and build a romance back in again?
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to work with him. And also what is so interesting, I hadn't realized that the acting rapport that we'd established in Excalibur is still there after so many years. It's almost as though there's a deep memory, and acting together, it feels very, very familiar even after all that time.
A coach, Master Cedric, the Frenchman.
Sure, which would be worse, the friar or the Frenchman? The friar. Definitely the friar.
Geneviève de la Croix.
You're alone. You are alone. You're very alone.
Are you feeling well?
I'm most well. Very well. Well.
And you are?
Cedric. Sir Cedric.
Okay, who do you play?
Play Cedric Grey. He's the youngest son of 3 sons from Sir Thomas Grey, my father. And he's the prankster of the family, I think, the skirt-chasing kid. And he's been reared to study for the church as a cleric rather than become a knight like his older brothers, and he desperately wants to do that, but he's being pushed back into this corner, and he has this religious path to follow, and he doesn't really want to do that. And you'll see, in the pilot, he gets to swashbuckle and stuff like that to overcome, this thing that he's meant to do.
Now, the show as a whole is sort of so different from anything else that's on. If a friend, if somebody asks you, "What's the show about?" What would your answer be? What's it about?
I said this to an American interviewer that came over. I said it's kind of a medieval bonanza. And then someone called me and said, geez, you got to see the cover of the LA Times. It says a medieval bonanza. So, that sums it up, really, the strong father, the kids, and we're really like, it's 1350 instead of, Ponderosa, with the castles and stuff like that. And, there's 3 sons, a daughter, and we're all, we don't have a mother. The mother's dead. And, cut. And it's basically. Do you want to know about the pilot?
Well, no, they will have seen that already. It's just generally what the show is like, and which about what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a conflict in each episode. For example, the one that we're doing now is the story about the brother. My older brother returns from the Crusades, and he's not the brother we all thought he was. He's 250 pounds heavier and likes to eat, and. you know, we go to see the Duke, and you know, all these bandits come in, and you know, we're all hostages. So it's, you know, and in each episode there's, you know, a conflict there, you know, where we've got to do something, draw our swords or something to save our father. It's always that the kids come to the rescue type of thing. You know, it's we've gained strength from our father, so now you're really seeing how we're growing up and that we can actually take care of things and actually, you know, save people, I guess.
Okay, but let's get to you as an actor now, because you're in a unique position in that you're doing the 2 shows.
Yeah, really.
But when I saw this pilot, I thought, God, isn't that strange? He can do an English accent perfectly.
Yeah.
Because
well,
to watch you as one would assume that you were born and raised in the Chicago suburbs.
Yeah.
What is your background?
Well, I was born in Dublin, Ireland, and I lived there for 18 years.
Did you really?
Yeah, so I've only been in the States about 4 years. So it's very strange. I mean, we're getting this mixture of Irish, English, and American stuff happening in this. So it's hard to, you know, you've got to really sit down and concentrate about, you know, which accent do you really want to do tonight or something. So, and it's fantastic. I'm flattered the way that I have this show now. And then, you know, I can skip across to the States. I was there 2 weeks ago to do a bunch of episodes for the upcoming season on Roseanne, and that was very strange just to be there and then come back a week later, and then you're in these armor and swords and wigs and everything. It's just very strange Halloween stuff. So it's great being able to do it, you know.
Yeah, it could get really schizophrenic. Well, it's so rare, I find, for a British actor to be able to do an American accent. Peter Sellers was good at it, but very few are.
Yeah.
When you first went to the U.S.,
well,
did it come easy to you? Or
well, I used to go there as a kid, 6, 7-year-old, you know, and I'd come back and I'd have this Yankee accent, and all the people in class would want to sit next to me, and they say, oh, I want to sit next to him, he's been to America. And so I was always taking them off, and then when I got over there, it was just basically, you know, observing and listening to how they speak and their tune, whereas, you know, the English lilt and everything is it's complete opposite. You know, they speak in, you know, in one sentence deal, you know, whereas the English are up, down, and the Irish as well. So it came very naturally, the American, and that helped me get the Roseanne thing.
Yeah.
And then coming back was really strange, just trying to do this English thing. So I had to draw on like old friends and stuff to remember, and basically being around an English crew all the time. Right, you know, I mean, if you forget anything, you can always go up and ask a rigger, like, how do you say this? You know, so it's easy really when you know, when you're involved in this. I mean, you can just, you know, get into what other people are saying, and you're drawn into how they're feeling, and it comes out. You know, so.
Sure does. It's really worked for you. So you said in the U.S. about 4 years?
Yeah, in Los Angeles.
And it was Dublin before that, so you lived in a city, so you weren't a
Yeah,
country, you weren't
no,
a
I
country
wasn't
boy.
a farm boy, no. No, I can't give you that sob story.
Now, did you know that you were going to act when you went to the U.S.?
Never, no. I was working on these nuclear power plants for about a year, 20 stories high, rope around you with your grinder. You know, I was a lot of jobs, a painter, a waiter.
Was this in California?
Yeah, so I did some stuff for years before any of this happened.
What brought the subject of acting into your mind?
I met this girl, and she said, why don't, you know, a few people, they were like saying, you know, we should do this, try it, you know, and I said, sure, I don't. So, you know, I got the piece of paper, and I went in, you know, and you eventually start reading for parts, and then it was, I don't know, you know, I never went to a class. I went to one class, it scared the crap out of me, you know. I wasn't into questions like, you know, trying to figure out what Hamlet had for breakfast one morning, you know, getting into the whole method thing. It's just more natural, just how's it going stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's, didn't really take classes.
And then you've just been working around?
Just
doing
just
shots
going
until-
to readings and, you know, found a good manager and a good agent. They take care of you, and it's up to you just to, you know, to concentrate on that particular job or, you know, a particular audition or meeting or whatever. You know, it's you that, you know, pays them. So you've got to do the work, you know.
Well, now, as Cedric, I mean, you're dealing with about swordplay, horseback, things that probably in your neighborhood in Dublin you didn't do a lot of. If you weren't trained in an acting
We had
school.
sharpened sticks, you know,
Yeah.
a couple of rocks.
But But quite seriously, obviously the guys who went to an acting school got swordsmanship. And
Yeah,
all
well,
that stuff.
yeah.
How did
No.
you? Has it been a problem for you?
At the start, I came away from the pilot with a bunch of scars from sword fighting at the end scene. It was difficult, you know, but we have a great stunt coordinator, Roy, who'd take us out and spend time with us, and, you know, he wouldn't let us roll unless we were prepared to do it. And I've always wanted to pick up a sword anyway and, like, slice someone's head off or something, so it's, you know, came very naturally. Just it's choreography, it's like a dance. You know, so the horse riding was kind of a problem at first.
Had you done any of that?
No, I took one of those silly photos as a kid with, you know, the cowboy clothes on a pony or something. I remember I was scared to death, but I mean, these are huge, huge horses, and you know, every day you have a couple of spare hours. You can go out and you can, you know, take the horse of your choice and see, you know, you command the horse, see how much power you have over him. So eventually, yeah, I'm comfortable now on them, you know. But I had to do that one scene where I get reared up, and that was quite scary because the horse could have fell back, and I under it, but you know, I jumped off. So that's enough. Stop.
What do you like, Eleanor?
The crossbow kills quickly, cleanly, and with great efficiency. Does that shock you, Lady Elizabeth?
Do you wish that it would?
Why do you want my father? Aren't 3 dead husbands enough?
It's always good when women understand each other. I only want the best for Thomas.
Then leave him alone. He doesn't need you. We don't need you.
Okay, if you would tell me who you play and a little about her.
I play Eleanor Gray, the daughter in the Gray family, who's a very emotional character, very kind of a hero in a way, tomboy, kind of, I don't know, I'd like to think that I'm sort of, you know, kind of a Joan of Arc, but, you know, without being religious or anything like that. That's sort of how, so far.
And in your mind, when people ask you what you're doing and what the show is about, what is it about?
It's about, well, it's basically about a family in medieval England, but mainly just about a family, and sort of, I'd say, an adventure, kind of an adventure series, just sort of about things that families go through, kind of, you know, been, you know, updated in a way, the issues a little bit, you know, but basically just about this family and the strength in the family.
Now, among some of the people who've seen the show initially, who screened it before it went on the air even, there were those who questioned or were bothered a little by the nature of the two women, by the kind of free-spirited and independent way that they had. Now, when you first read the script, did that surprise you? Did you have a feeling to that, or did it just seem natural?
I definitely wasn't bothered by the women's roles being strong. I think that, in history there were very few women that you read about who were very strong, but there were women in history like that who were, you know, had business sense and who were very powerful. I mean, you know, queens, certain queens, and definitely women in history. So it definitely, I mean, I was pleased by it. I wasn't bothered, and I think there are other things that are probably less the period than having the women's be strong. You know, I think that that's one of the things that was appealing to us, you know.
Yeah, I would think that probably you're of a generation that grew up with women, older women who are, you know, taking their own place in the world and doing those things that maybe 2 or 3 generations ago would have seemed odd.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, you mean women's roles or just women
I mean
in
women
general?
in life, I mean people that you knew,
Right.
that you looked
Yeah,
at when you were a child.
It's true. I guess in certain countries it's still, going to be, the women are going to be kind of play a subservient role, and that's just the way it works. And I guess the sort of women's generation began in the 60s and the 70s, I suppose. But I suppose, I mean, for me, I just saw women kind of in the world as men were. So that's been my view.
Now, for you as the working actress working on this, the nature of this show, and by that very style of your character, calls for a lot of physical stuff with swords, with horseback riding, with running, jumping, that British actors kind of are taught in school and always. Were you, or is this coming new to you?
Well, I've never really played an kind of action adventure role before, but I think it's sort of in actors naturally to kind of be able to do things, in 2 days, or you have to be a musician, so you kind of learn a little bit, about an instrument, and it's kind of that's part of the job, that you take to something really quickly, and I think it must be in most actors. So all the physical stuff, fortunately the stunt people are brilliant and they really do prep you, but I don't know, the past couple of days, some of the stunts that we've been doing. Yeah. Yesterday we jumped from this roof was 10 feet tall, and I had someone sort of leading me down, but it was really kind of ridiculous. But it's been fun. The sword fighting, I was surprised. I thought it would be a nightmare in the armor and in the sun. It was like the one hot day in England, and I had to be wearing all of that stuff. But I was very into it. It definitely is, kind of developing the role for me. It gets me into it.
Yeah, I had also wondered about that, because in your previous work, from what I know, well, of course there was the Napoleon, but I did think it was a very contemporary kind of actress, and now you've got 40 pounds of wardrobe that you're wearing. Is the physical weight a greater problem than the reality that comes from wearing it? How do you feel about that?
Well, they make the armor lightweight so that it's not intense. I mean, doing, of course, this, is pre-corsets and all of those things, and because I dress sort of like a man, my clothes are quite comfortable, and when I do have to put on a dress, it's more just sort of, tied up, and so they're not too uncomfortable. Not like certain periods, like Napoleon times. Those dresses definitely are way more uncomfortable.
Now, this, I think, is with food, gas, lodging, and the other things, a very, very intense time in your career. Does it bother you at all to be here doing this instead of in California, where your friends are?
Well, I'm having a really good time here. I thought I would be kind of miserable because I just got married, but luckily, my husband's going to be visiting me, and I have a few friends staying with me, so everyone's going to kind of come over. But I miss my animals and my mother and all of that. But I like kind of, I kind of get nervous when things open, movies come out and things like that. So I'm kind of happy to be hidden away. No, I'm having a good time. I'm surprised that, I thought I'd be kind of miserable, but it's good.